Metalheads love defining genres of music. First off, we have metal, which leads way to heavy metal, which then gave way to death metal. Then, on the other hand, we have punk rock, which birthed hardcore, which combined with metal to make metalcore. Then, in the early 2000s, metalcore and death metal came together to create the beautiful genre of deathcore. But let's stop pretending. All that we want is for our music to go hard. And if you're a Christian, you also want to make sure that they're not satanic. In a genre with bands with names like Infant Annihilator, sometimes you may need a guide to separate the cream from the crap. Not to say all secular bands are bad, but sometimes we need some real biblical lyrics to hold on to. Before we dive in, I want to say these aren't in any particular order. I wake up one day with one list, and by the time my head hits the pillow that same day, the list will look completely different. So if your favorite band isn't on here, fret not. Maybe they'll be in another one. Limiting myself to only 5 bands was a sad challenge. All that being said, let's get away from me talking and get to these guys screaming. Here's my top 5 Christian deathcore bands. First off, Diamonds to Dust. Formed in 2012, their roots are a little more metalcore focused, but if you take a look at their more popular music right now, they've certainly planted their flag deep in the island of deathcore. Most recently, they've released some of their best stuff yet in their Temporary Affliction EP. The song of the same name is one of my personal favorites of theirs, but by far their most popular song is Corpus Christi, which is Latin for Body of Christ. Pretty epic. The song, like a lot of their music, is focused on the end times, and it's just a great song, but it ends with one of the most skull-crushing breakdowns ever, where the lead vocalist, Christian Roche, using his insanely talented vocals, might I add, goes through Luke chapter 22, 17 through 19 in Latin over and over again until the song ends. That's just a little bit of how Diamonds to Dust rolls, so if you like the sound of that, please give them a listen. I'll leave them and all the other bands mentioned in this video in the description. Next up, Unworthy. Unworthy is a bit of a younger band. They formed in 2021 with the debut album In the Face of Death, and since then have dropped 2 more albums. Most recently, they released This Present Darkness, and it's great stuff. Unworthy does tend to focus a bit more on the bleak side of Christianity with songs like Satan Whispers and Forsaken by God. That being said, this is deathcore, so I'm not sure what you were expecting. Plus, the music does really hit close to home for people who maybe experience doubt or worry in the faith, which is why it always hits that much harder when they tie a song up in a beautiful bow at the end in the form of a prayer. In songs like This Present Darkness and especially This Too Shall Pass, they include a prayer at the end, and they seem to always focus on the message of hope that is integral to the faith. For example, Lord, please increase my faith. I believe, help my unbelief. All this awesome faith-based lyrical talent is packaged with some phenomenal instrumentals and some chunky vocals. Please give Unworthy a listen when you get a chance. Cultist, my beloved. Cultist released their first EP, The Preacher, back in 2018, and in 2021 they released their first album, An Observation of Grief. Both releases are great, introspective, faith-based pieces, and then, in 2023, they casually dropped their most recent album at the time of writing this, Slow Suicide, which is one of the best deathcore albums I have ever heard. If I really like an album, I'll have maybe a third or even half of the songs listed on my playlist. I have every Slow Suicide song on my playlist. They refuse to miss. And better yet, in 2024, they dropped the single Pray For Me, which is contender for their best song they've ever made. Although, with songs like Preacher 3 and the album's namesake Slow Suicide, the answer to the question is going to be a debate. And if you're curious why they go by Cultist, according to Genius.com, they've said, Christ is the only thing that separates true religion from a pointless cult. even in Christianity. And the name Cultist is something of a reminder of that. If you do not have Christ, you're just following vain rules to a pointless end. Cultist is another band that maybe takes a more depressing approach to their lyrics, but again, it's just such powerful music and it always has that biblical foundation. Their song from the Observation of Grief album, I in Weakness of Flesh, shows this pretty aptly. The first half of the song is a self-hating, humbling section, followed by the second half, which is a repeated prayer of gratitude. Powerful stuff. Give them a listen. With blood comes cleansing. My light fell. With blood comes cleansing. If you're a fan of old school deathcore, you will love this band. But that being said, you'll also just love them if you're a regular deathcore fan. They released their first album, Golgotha, in 2006, and then their second album, Horror, in 2008. Not long after, they took an extended hiatus, which lasted until 2022. A few years later, they took on a new lead vocalist, and just this year, released their third album after 17 years of little new music, and wow, was it worth the wait. Don't get me wrong, the band's whole discography is spirit-filled, crushing deathcore madness, and it's awesome. But the self-titled album is a great concept piece. The album is 9 songs, the first and last are named after Bible verses, and every song in between is based on a different martyr: Stephen, Peter, Simon, Mark, Bartholomew, Thomas, and Luke, and the different ways that they were executed for their devotion to the kingdom. It's another one of those albums where every song eventually finds its way onto my daily playlist. There are a lot of bands that focus on the emotional and spiritual aspects of the Christian faith in their music, and do not get me wrong, that's absolutely what we want, and they deliver on that plenty. That being said, With Blood Comes Cleansing also has a lot of music that's dedicated to the physical side of things. A great example of this is their recent album that has a lens on Christian history, but also their song off the horror album Hematidrosis, which talks, or screams, about how Christ and the Bible describing Jesus as sweating blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. Luke chapter 22 verse 44, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Hematidrosis is the condition in which, under extreme emotional stress, one begins to literally sweat blood. It's a phenomenal song, listen to it. On this whole list, With Blood Comes Cleansing is the only band I've had the pleasure of seeing live, and hearing their song Golgotha live had me tearing up a little bit. Anyways, I could go on for literal hours talking up their stuff, so go become one of their monthly listeners. I wanted to go over some honorable mentions since there are seriously so many great deathcore bands that deserve an audience and that I want to talk about. But there were some that either only had a few releases as of now, or maybe I haven't listened to their discographies enough to write about them for a paragraph, but they all deserve some recognition. Morning Eve falls under deathcore with clean vocals, and at the time of writing this, they've only released 4 singles. Their most recent one, Holy Hell, is probably their hardest song yet. It's absolutely spectacular. The song is a conversation between a young adult, an angry parent, and a corrupt pastor, creating hell in a holy place. That being said, all their music is great, so give it a listen. Voluntary Mortification definitely leans more to the death metal than metalcore, but dang it if they aren't phenomenal deathcore. The band recently released their first music in a few years with the single Death Cult, where they praise God, deny hell, and quote the Dies Irae in its original Latin. The song is their first release from their upcoming EP, Mortem Cultus. I literally cannot wait for it to come out. But if you want more of their stuff, you can listen to their 2022 album, Suffer to Rise. Searching Serenity is actually a solo project by the current lead singer of With Blood Comes Cleansing, Robert Manzone. So if you heard that band but want more of his vocals, there's plenty of Christ-focused deathcore in there, and it is greatly underappreciated. Also, he did a deathcore cover of All I Want for Christmas Is You back in 2022, and it is by far the best version of that song, so go follow that project. There's so much more deathcore that we could talk about, but this video sadly can't go on forever, so let's just get to our number 1, and if you've been in the community for at least 5 minutes, you probably know who I'm about to say is the hardest, most intense, and visceral deathcore band.
Oh, where is my hairbrush? Oh, where?
I'm just kidding. Impending Doom. Impending Doom doesn't just top Christian deathcore lists. I've seen it out in the wild on top 10 deathcore bands lists, going bar for bar in the secular world against regular deathcore bands. And that's not because they made any attempts at hiding their faith. It's front and center from their first album, Nailed, Dead, Risen, all the way to their recent EP, Towards the Light. What can I say that hasn't been said about this band? The grandiose biblical lyrics, the insane instrumentals, Brooke Reeves demolishing the mic every time. They hate the modern world, as they've made clear in the songs like Culture of Death and Everything's Fake. They hate Satan, according to Devil's Den and War Music. They deny themselves, according to Murderer and Spit. And they love Jesus, according to Christ is King and Murderer. Again, Murderer is a really good song. What Impending Doom seems to have mastered is writing breakdowns where they repeat the same phrase a few times, and then having that breakdown get stuck in my head forever. Death will reign, hellhole, eternal, punishment, satanic panic, in the end, hellbent. Those are just some of theirs that I refuse to skip when they come up in my rotation on my playlist. One thing I will say that maybe you don't know is that the lead vocalist Brooke Reeves actually has a side project titled Man of God. It's kind of like Christian trap metal. It's a good time if you're into that sort of thing, which I am. But yeah, Impending Doom. I'd say go listen to them, but I'm guessing that if you're here, you already do. And that was my top 5 Christian deathcore bands. Again, this list wasn't in a particular order. I love all these bands, and my intention wasn't to like pit them against each other or anything. They all deserve an audience, and if I didn't mention your favorite Christian deathcore band, maybe I don't know them yet. So recommend them to me in the comments. That way I can collect Christian metal bands like Thanos collects Infinity Stones.
It's just the way it is. I'm just a messenger.
This is the part of the video where I'm supposed to recommend what video you watch next or something, but this is a brand new endeavor for me. So follow the Firebrand Instagram, subscribe here, and yeah.
I also did a podcast with Michael Felker. It was really cool. And when this video is out, that'll also have been out. So watch that.
I'll be doing more podcast episodes soon, so listen to that as well. Thank you for watching, and God made you special, and he loves you very much. Bye-bye.